Well, what's up, everyone? Welcome back to Moments with the Marcelins. My name is June.
And my name is Stephanie.
And we are the Marcelins. Our moments together will be centered on three things: transparency, tools, and truth. Listen, I'm very excited because we have a very special guest with us today. This ministry has blessed my life in a tremendous way. And so we have Carl Thomas, who is the CEO and founder of the Live Free organization. So Carl, if you wouldn't mind letting me know a little bit about yourself and the organization that you work with.
Yeah, sure, man. So we started Live Free, or I started Live Free summer 2019. I had worked with XXX Church in a variety of capacities for about 7 or 8 years. So I had been in this area of ministry, sexual addiction, whatever you want to call it, for close to a decade. I had my own struggles with that, which we can get into later if you want. But, did all sorts of things with them, managed all their website properties, marketing, ran their small groups program, built and ran their small groups program, taught one of their workshops, just in all sorts of things. And then in 2019, Craig, who is the founder, decided that, he was going to step away from the day-to-day stuff. He still was in charge of Fireproof, which is the actual nonprofit that owned XXX Church. And then he was going to hand that ministry off, at least from the day-to-day perspective, to somebody else. There was a couple that he had kind of targeted. And right at the same time, I said, yeah, I'm going to do this thing. So we started Live Free, launched our app that November called the Live Free Community app. And the focus was just all about giving guys in particular, or specifically, a safe place to start their recovery journey where they could talk to other men, get the encouragement, advice, all sorts of things without feeling like the whole goal was to set the bar really low, because a lot of times this is such a shameful struggle for so many people that even what we, and when I say we, I mean, but people that maybe don't struggle with it, think is like, it's not that big a deal. To them, it's a really big deal, right? So getting an downloading accountability software sounds great and all, but you got to have an accountability partner. And that's a big deal trying to find one, right? Even a $99 workshop, right? And there's workshops out there that are thousands of dollars, and, or coaches that are thousands of dollars, whatever. But even something as simple as a $99 workshop, if you're a guy that's been dealing with this for 20 years and all you're used to is failing, $99 is just it's just $99 waste of money, right? And from your perspective, because it's like, this ain't going to work. So why am I going to spend $99 just to find that out, right? So, porn, the reason porn is so pervasive is because it's accessible, anonymous, and affordable, right? Like those are the 3 A's. Yeah. So the idea was like, hey, let's build a recovery focused app that kind of operates on those same principles, right? Guys can sign up technically anonymously. I mean, hopefully they're using their real name and stuff or uploading their picture, but they don't have to. We got tons of guys in the community. There's no picture, but it's anonymous, right? They can sign up right from the privacy of their own phone. No one even knows. It's accessible because it's an app, 24/7. There's guys on that community all day long, and it's affordable. It's $5 a month, not $1,500 for a 12-week course, So that was the idea. Combat the issue with something that offers the same benefit, same appeal, right? Yeah. So we did that, and that's been growing, and it's just been an amazing experience. And then in December, we decided to launch something called Live Free Wives, which is like a community just for spouses. That's a completely free community that basically operates the same way Live Free does, but for women. And then in March of this year, I sent Craig, who is the founder of Fireproof, email, and I was just like, or text message actually. And I was just like, hey, listen, whatever you were doing with this other couple, nothing's happening there at this point. What would you say to us acquiring it? So he jumped on the phone with me that night, and 3 weeks later we had a deal. And so now Live Free owns XXX Church as well.
That's awesome. Wow, that's amazing. This topic is so taboo in certain circles. And I think you mentioned one of those things being, the shame that's acquired through it. Why do you think that this topic is so taboo in many Christian communities still?
Because it's sex. It involves sex. I mean, the reality is, the funny thing is, and I think you want to get into this later, but the funny thing is, like, porn isn't really about sex. I know that sounds kind of crazy to say, but it's really not. But in our minds, it's about sex, right? And so anything about sex is always a little taboo. And a lot of that is because of historically, back in the day, Christian unhealthy perspectives on sex and sexuality.
Yeah.
There's people out there that think sex is only good for procreating. And even then it's kind of icky. There's just so much really bad theology out there about sex and sexuality in the first place. A lot of Christians like to walk around and pretend like sexuality isn't a part of our identity. And it's like, no, like, sexuality is part of who we are. It's not something to be shunned or discarded, but we like to pretend like, well, sexuality is really not a thing. And it is. So, it's funny, but when you're in kindergarten, penis, vagina, words like that, like, make you giggle and stuff, because you're a kid, right?
Mm-hmm.
40 years later, 50 years later, we're no better, like, it's stupid, like, you're an adult. You should be able to say penis without feeling weird. But I mean, let's be honest, like, even and I don't say that to be brag. I'm just saying, like, in the work I do, internally, I can feel a difference when I say the word cat versus the word vagina. Like, there, like, a little hair goes up in the back of my neck. Did you just say vagina? Yeah, I did. But it is what it is, right? So, in really blunt, kind of crass layman's terms, anytime the subject involves your penis, people are going to have a weird thing about it, guys and women included, right? Yeah. Hey, we can talk about your health. We can talk about your finances. Let's not talk about your penis. That's just weird. And it shouldn't be, but that's how it is.
Definitely agree with that. Yeah. Some people think that there's no harmful effects. Can you just touch on, what are some of the harmful effects of porn consumption, physically, mentally, spiritually, also emotionally?
Yeah. So here's the thing about that. That's like still a debated issue in like the more academic circles, when you get into topics or questions of like, is it addictive? And there's like these measures or litmus tests for a substance to be considered truly addictive. So, and I think Dr. Oz, whatever, years ago, like, talk about like, well, healthy porn versus, healthy porn use versus unhealthy porn use. Like, so there's just so much of a vast array of different opinions in terms of like, is porn okay? Is it not okay? So here's the thing. I'm coming from, a lot of it's going to come from your worldview too, right? So if you come from a worldview where sex is not something that's reserved for marriage, sex is not for the purposes of building intimacy and connection, it's more for the purposes of physical pleasure, then some of what I'm going to say isn't going to ring true, because you're going to be like, no, like, hey, sex is like, it's like drinking a beer. Like, if I can do it, why wouldn't I? Yeah. But if you come from the perspective that like, hey, sex is for the purposes of building intimacy and connection, not for the purposes of an orgasm per se, and sex is for the purposes of marriage, then, the reality is, anytime you bring something else into the relationship outside of each other, two spouses, you're going to destroy or at least damage the bond between the two of you, right? Because now you're no longer bonding emotionally and physically with each other. You're bringing a kind of a middleman into the mix to bridge the gap. And that's not going to bring you together at all. In fact, it's probably going to make you drift farther apart, right? And then, so that's relationally, and then emotionally, like we already touched on this, but it's the shame of it, right? Like, hey, I know I feel kind of dirty about this. And so that breeds shame. And then the shame actually drives us to go look at porn again, to kind of forget about the shame, which makes us feel more shame. So like emotionally, it's very debilitating. And then if you do have a faith base, whatever that is, spiritually, it's going to mess you up too. because you're going to see yourself as like, well, hey, I'm not in a position where I can actually approach my God, right? Because I'm jacked up. Again, whatever God you worship is going to drastically alter how you view these things. But if you're a believer in Jesus, then, it's like the reality is like God doesn't ever withdraw from us, right? He's always pursuing us. So when you hear a guy who's struggling with porn say, oh man, I feel so distant from God, what he's really saying without realizing it is, I'm running away from God because I feel too shameful to be in his presence. So now, hence the distance, right? But it's like you created that distance, God didn't, right? And so that's going to mess up with your faith, right? Because you don't feel like you can approach the God that wants you to approach him all the time.
Yeah. Yeah. At what moment did you realize that this was your assignment, that you wanted to do this full time and just help people?
Well, I mean, I got out of the insurance industry, what was it, 10 or 11 years ago? And at the time, before I got out of it, I had just gone to seminary because I just felt like God was calling me some form of ministry. I had no idea what it was at that point. In my mind, I thought maybe I go work for my church. That would have been a massive mistake. But anyway, at the time, I was like, oh, I'll be a pastor. Like, no, I mean, I am a pastor, but no, like a pastor within a church, like that's not my cup of tea. But I didn't know. Right. And then because I had my own struggles with porn, and Triple X Church was actually very instrumental in me breaking from that, just through a series of circumstances. I ended up just saying, hey, can I volunteer? Because this is kind of a subject that's dear to my heart. And then, opportunities came where it's like, hey, would you like to lead this? Would you like to do this? And before you know it, then they're offering me a job. And then, a couple years in, I'm like, yeah, I think this is where I'm supposed to be, because this was my issue. And, I know how good it is when you don't have that issue. And so I want to see that for other people.
Yeah. Yeah, that's beautiful. I know you mentioned that initially when you designed your app, it was more, targeted for men, but then you designed a different community for spouses and women. What would you say is the data compared to women and men who are addicted to pornography?
So our community for women is specifically for spouses to support them who are dealing with the men who have an issue, right? We don't have a online community per se for women who struggle. Okay. We do have online small groups for those women, but we haven't built a community yet. That is something that ideally we'd like to do at some point, but it's there's a lot of logistics and hoops to jump through for that to make it work right. I mean, I have the right woman in place to run the spouses community. I'm not going to run a female community. That's ridiculous. I'm not going to try to even pretend like I know enough to tell a woman how to live her life. That's pretty arrogant. So, but down the road, that's something we want to do regardless. So to get back to your question, like women see, and so sometimes when you're dealing with statistics, the problem is at the end of the day, these statistics are all relying upon self-identification, right? So, or honesty, if you will, right? So it's like, hey, did you struggle with porn? Well, now you're relying on whether or not the guy's going to actually say yes or no, right? And then there's the other aspects of like, well, what's porn to you versus porn to me? For a guy, you say porn, you think video, pictures, whatever. For a woman, it could be audio, it could be books, it could be whatever, right? So all those things are kind of difficult to like know 100%, but historically, the figures I've seen the most are 50% of men. I'd say it's a lot higher than that, but that's what they claim. About 50% of men deal with porn on some level. And it used to be like, I think like 20% of women. Now I think it's like somewhere between 20 and 30%, supposedly again. But I would say that number's probably even higher, just because it goes to the same reason why starting a community just for women is harder for us to do than for men. Is because from my experiences and from what I've seen in this ministry, as shameful as guys feel about it, they're still far more prone to self-identify as a person struggling with this than a woman, right? Because the women have that extra level of shame that this is a guy's issue, and it's not, but that's what they think. So it's like, hey, I deal with this. Plus I'm dealing with the guy's issue. So I'm really jacked up, you know? So they're even less prone to self-identify. So I would say it's probably higher than that, but you know, they're catching up, put it that way.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, definitely. I'm pretty sure that there are some people viewing this video or listening, and the $1 million question that they have is, Carl, how do I break from this addiction? And also, what approach has Live Free done that is different than other? What separates Live Free than any other organization to break free and get that healing that they need?
Yeah. So here's the thing, man. There's no magic bullet. That's the spoiler. Unfortunately, a lot of people think there is. That's why there's, you know, it's funny. Like I said this to a friend the other day. I said, you know, back 10 years ago, no one was talking about porn. Now, if you go on Instagram and you follow the right hashtags, you can't swing a dead cat without hitting some guy peddling his porn coaching course, you know? And they're always promising like that magic bullet, and there is no magic bullet, right? It's work. It's not work in terms of like what we tend to think of as like white knuckling. Hey, I can't look. I got to lock down my device. It's not that type of work. I mean, there's elements of that, but it's like, it's a lot of investment of time, sometimes investment of money, but most importantly, investments in relationships and just honesty, you know, dealing with the emotional fallout of dealing with some of the things you need to deal with, right? Like, so porn is, like I said earlier, is like porn's not really so much about sex as it is about, hey, it's a really strong, some people like to use the word medicant, whatever you want to call it. It's a nice salve for the wounds that we're dealing with. So we deal with anxiety and feeling less than adequate and shameful or whatever. Porn is a great way to kind of forget about all that. Or at least numb it, right? Numb that conflict. And so that takes a lot of dedication to be able to work on that internal conflict, because when you do that, you're going to open up a can of worms, and it's going to be emotionally hard, right? But you need to do it. That's the deal. So for us, the way we've approached this is, it's funny because when I first worked for XXX Church, they had X3 Watch, which is their software, which is still out there. We still recommend it, even though it's not really our software. That's still actually property of Fireproofs. But we had X3 Watch at the time, and we had X3 Pure, the video course, which is the one I teach. And we've put out some other things. They put out some other things in the meantime. But it was always video courses and accountability software. And then came the idea of like, hey, let's try online support / small groups, right? And that was the program I was in charge of. And for years, that was always kind of treated as like this kind of third alternative, but these are the two we really want to focus on. And because of what I had seen, and granted, some of this might just be from my perspective, but running the small groups program, I got to see the actual transformation happening in people's lives. You know, you sell someone accountability software or a course, maybe they do it, maybe they don't. Hardly ever you're going to get a report like, hey, I actually found freedom. Like, you don't know, you just hope, right? But with small groups, like it's a weekly thing. So we heard from members, from our leaders, like, hey, this guy's getting help, or this guy's doing better. So just over the course of working with them and doing all that, I had just come to realize, it's like, you know, like we got this thing all wrong. Making community the third optional piece of the 3-piece puzzle is completely the wrong thing. That should be like the big piece, right? You need community and relationship first. And then let's talk about individual accountability and maybe software that might help you with that. Let's talk about courses. Let's talk about getting you connected with a counselor or even a coach or, whatever. Let's talk about all that after, but we need to get you into some sort of community relationship first, because going back to the whole shame aspect, if you can't talk about it, you're never going to escape the shame of it. And if you can't escape the shame of it, in my opinion, you're never going to be free of it. Like, it's just not going to happen. You got to escape the shame. And the first step to escaping the shame is saying, hey, I'm going to talk about this with somebody, even if it's just a bunch of guys who also are dealing with the same thing, but at least you're owning it and talking about it, you know?
Awesome. Thank you so much for that. And one thing that I actually love that you were saying is you're using the word shame and not the word guilt, because shame and guilt are so different. And so sometimes we have a misconception of like, oh, I feel this and I just kind of feel guilty that I'm doing it. But honestly, there's a shame factor that's associated with what I'm dealing through or what I'm going with. And it's like the enemy uses that shame to really kind of keep us in that place. It's not always just guilt. So I just wanted to mention that, and I just really appreciate using that term as well. Would you mind sharing a little bit about your story? I know you had mentioned at the beginning, you kind of dealt with this at some point and, had used some of XXX church resources to kind of overcome some of that. So anything additional that you would want to add to that?
Yeah, well, first of all, I didn't kind of deal with it. Like I dealt with it hardcore for probably 20 years. Like, I mean, I joke around about, I was quite the porn aficionado. Like I knew my porn. Right. So that was a thing for me. I went through a long period of my life where I had no desire to change anything about it. Like I was happy using porn. It was fine. Got married, eventually told my wife about it. That's a long story, but really short version, funny version of it is I got horribly sick one night and I thought God was taking me out because, again, messed up version of God, but I thought God was like taking me out for being such an idiot. So I figured, well, hey, before I die, I might as well get this off my chest.
Wow.
Complete jackass move, but whatever. So I go out to my wife 2:00 in the morning. I was like, hey, I look at porn. I'm sorry. Turns out I had pneumonia and I wasn't going to die. Well, I might have if I didn't get treated, but I had pneumonia. That's why I felt so terrible. But meanwhile, the cat was out of the bag. So then at that point, I was in this kind of like, hey, I want to quit this thing, but I wasn't like necessarily doing any of the stuff I needed to do. Just kind of like hoping it would go away. And if I just don't look today, which is completely the wrong, way to go about it. And then just came to a lot of circumstances. So I'm not going to get into all the details, but basically came to this idea like, hey, you know what? Like I need to get more serious with my relationship with God. And this is something that's a big deal. Right. So then I started getting more serious about it. I found an accountability partner. I followed XXX Church from afar. I never actually used the resources. Again, I was that guy that was looking at going like $99. I ain't wasting that. Right. Mm-hmm. But then I started going to seminary because I thought I was going to go into some form of ministry. And then I just through a conversation with a guy actually from XXX Church at one of their missions outreaches that I was participating with. Don't ask me how I got on that trip, but I didn't lie my way there. It just was a weird, fluky set of circumstances that they ended up putting the porn addict on a show to go on a team to go to a porn show to hand out Bibles. They had no idea I was a porn addict, but a guy in the process of trying to recover. But I had a conversation, and in that conversation, like it just kind of came out that this guy was like, yeah, I deal with a lot of pastors, and I got to tell them like, hey man, maybe you need to step back for a season and get this thing under control. And they don't like that very much. And I was like, what are you talking about? And he starts breaking out Bible verses about Titus and Thessalonians and the qualifications of an elder and stuff I had all read and ignored. And I was like, oh, wow. Like, this guy was younger than me. And like this young buck is basically telling me without even realizing that, like, dude, you need to get your crap together if you really want to pursue this calling thing. Right. And so it was like a light switch moment where I was like, oh, when I'm messing with this stuff, it's messing with a whole lot more than just my shame levels or the moment. It's messing with like my life, like where I want to go in life, what I want to do with my life. And so the consequences of my choices became that much greater. And so, I just started saying, hey, it wasn't like it stopped being a focus on, oh, I can't do that. I can't do that. I can't do that. It started becoming more of a focus of like, no, I want to do this. And if I want to do this, then that just really has no place here. And so I just was able to start making better decisions at that point. And then over time, I also started seeking counseling down the road, but, got some of the emotional healing I needed to get. And like, we're always a work in progress. I still see a counselor today for whatever, just tune-ups, but you know, it was a long process, but that was the main thing that kind of triggered it. So it was my relationship or interaction with Triple X Church, but not necessarily their resources in the very beginning. But that is what kind of plugged me in with them and got the ball rolling.
Yeah. You know, as you're talking, there's like several C's that I'm hearing a lot. And one, like you already mentioned, community, the coaching aspect, the counseling, as well as the commitment that it took to break that cycle and get the freedom that you need. We're going to wrap up soon, but I wanted to know, what is the most challenging aspect of your job that you do? And also, what is the most rewarding part of it?
Well, the rewarding is easy. Like, it's just seeing stories or getting messages. Like I've gotten so many different messages over the past 2 years. And like, I mean, some of them have been lengthy, some of them have been short, but like, that's just like spiritual caffeine. You know, I remember one guy, like literally he sent me a message. It was really short and simple. He just said, "Hey, this app is saving my marriage." He's like, "My wife was going to leave me. And now she sees I'm getting serious about this. Like, she's sticking around." And I'm like, that was cool. You know, so that's the most rewarding, is just seeing how it impacts people. The most challenging, and this is going to sound kind of businessy, but the most challenging is honestly just trying to balance business versus ministry. You know, people say like, "Oh, a nonprofit is just a business," and it's a nonprofit, but it's a business, and it is a business, and you have to let it, you know, or generate revenue to keep the work going. But what happens is a lot of times you'll see nonprofits, and I include churches in that, where the focus becomes so much on the revenue generating or the numbers generating or this or that. So we can do this, you know, so we can hire this staffer, and so we can build that building, or so we can do this. That at some point it's like, well, wait a minute, like, why do we get into this thing in the first place? You know? So that's the balancing act, is like, hey, I want to stay ministry minded first, but still be pretty smart, or at least wise, when it comes to my business dealings. You know, so like the app, just to give you an example, like the app's $5 a month. Now, when we were launching it and we were talking about price points, I had a lot of people come to me and say, "This is too cheap. You should charge more." And I was like, "Yeah, I know. I'm not gonna. Like, we're just not going to do it, because that gets away from one of our main principles or values as an organization, that recovery should be affordable and accessible." So if we keep jumping up the price, like, we're getting away from our core value. And I mean, I've had people come to me down the road and say, "Hey, have you built a funnel, or how are you going to upsell them to the next thing? And how are you going to upsell them to the next thing?" And I'm like, dude, like, it doesn't matter. Like, 10 years down the road, if I have 100 people come to me and say, "Hey, you should be charging $20 a month," it's not going up. It's staying at $5 a month. I don't care if we're giving away money or not. You know what I mean? But on the other hand, I also have to keep an eye on numbers and make sure that, we can generate enough revenue to pay for things. So that's absolutely the biggest challenge, is balancing business and ministry. And then even with products that you might call in the marketing world an upsell, it's like, yeah, there's a place for those too, but it's just trying to figure out, like, hey, are we doing this because this is a higher level of care, and this is the value of that care, and it's going to really help someone, or are we just doing something because we can add a bigger price tag to it? And it's like, if the main reason you're coming out with a new product is just so you can charge more money, then I would say as a ministry, that's a bit of a problem. If you're coming out with a new product because you legitimately think it's going to help people and it's got a lot of value, and then you attach the proper cost to that, no problem, right? But people are still going to always have problems with that, either on both sides, right? You come out with the product that's got a little bit of a bigger price because it's like that much more intensive and offers that much more value. They're going to say, "Hey, why aren't you giving away for free? What are you? Are you a ministry or not?" So you can't win.
For sure.
What last words would you share with our listeners, maybe to encourage them either on their journey, whether they are the person who is addicted and is coming to the realization that I need to get the help that I need? Maybe it's a spouse, a girlfriend, or even a boyfriend that's like, "Hey, wow, I don't know what to do at this point in my life." What message of encouragement would you leave them?
Yeah. I mean, well, the first thing is, you're not alone. That's the thing we got to realize is like, this is really common, and you're not alone. And just because people don't want to talk about this in your church or in your family or whatever, doesn't mean that it's not a thing, right? It's just a thing that we're all trying to ignore or pretend doesn't exist, but it is a thing. You're not especially messed up or jacked up. Like, we're all broken people. And it's just my brokenness might vary from yours, right? I don't deal with porn anymore per se. So I got rid of that form of brokenness in my life, but I still got other crap I got to deal with. I'm not a perfect guy, and I still got issues I got to deal with. So the biggest thing is just, you need to get past the shame of all that and realize that, hey, yeah, this is a thing, but it's not a thing that makes me especially bad or especially a problem. Everybody's got a thing. This is my thing, and I got to deal with it. And the first step is find some community, find a place, find some people, find a community, whatever, where you can start talking about this and at least get the ball rolling. Right. It's not, I think I was actually on another podcast the other day, and they asked me about Live Free. And he said, what was the word? What did he say? He said, yeah, it's kind of like, you're bringing people into a hardware store with a bunch of tools, and you're like, hey, you don't have to pick up that hammer. You don't have to do this. You don't have to do that. Just show up, and look around and see what's available. And eventually, hopefully you will pick up a hammer, or you will pick up some plans, or you will do this, and same thing. It's like, just get the ball rolling, right? If you start talking about it, you don't have to have everything figured out right off the bat, right? You don't have to have an A to Z plan. You don't have to have your counselor picked out. Just start talking about it, and you'll start to put the pieces together slowly but surely.
Definitely. For those listening right now or viewing this, and they want to connect with you, is there any way that anyone can connect with you?
I mean, the best way to get a hold of us is either through our websites, xxchurch.com, or livefreecommunity.org. Livefreecommunity.org is basically the best place to sign up for the app if you're a guy. We also have livefreewives.org. So that's if you're a spouse. But yeah, that's probably the best way to reach out to us. In fact, we have something now on XXX Church we're starting in August called Office Hours. And so it's the URL is xxchurch.com/office-hours, right? And basically you go on that webpage and you can ask us any question you have. And then we're going to answer that question. Each week, we're going to take like 5 to 10 questions, and we're going to break them down and answer them, and then basically put out the video, podcast, whatever that answers them. So that's honestly the best way to reach out to them. If they want to reach out to me individually for whatever reasons, I just send people to LinkedIn. Just say, hey, go to LinkedIn and in message me. That's way better, because then 1,000 different spammers won't get my email and start sending me a bunch of emails. Like LinkedIn, I can just block them and,
Yeah, for sure. Yeah. Well, Carl, we just want to thank you again for your time, for speaking, for your openness, your transparency. I think more conversations like this need to happen on a normal basis, where it's not so taboo and just open. And so thank you again for that.
Yeah. Thank you for your time.
You're welcome. Thank you.
All right.
All right.